The story of Elizabeth Scott began in 1949 with my grandmother, Elizabeth Scott. She was a farmer's wife. At a point in her life, but it was probably the empty nest syndrome, her husband died. And really, he was a farmer, and that's all they did. They had no other income. So she went to the what was called the state hospital. She got a licensed practical nursing degree. At that time, the medical director at the state hospital suggested she take some of the ladies back to her farm home and care for them there, and really started her farm nursing home at that point.
She lived on site. She actually had I guess there was like a mobile home or some kind of trailer or something on site that she lived at right there.
My grandmother influenced my parents, Mary and Vern Bucher, to get into this type of business.
My mother called one day and said, there's a nursing home in Waterville that's going to be condemned. It wasn't in the worst shape in the world, but it wasn't good. It needed to be cleaned up. My husband was working. He worked for a big company in Toledo. He built a lot of buildings, commercial buildings.
They bought this nursing home. They were in their 30s. They were not, financially stable, and I think it was probably a bigger challenge for my dad.
He could do a lot of the work that needed to be done, remodeling and things.
He went to work as a carpenter, was a contractor, and a general manager at a construction company.
So when he'd get home from work, then, he'd pitch in. We just kept going, till all times of the day and night.
It later became Hillcrest Care Center. That's what they called it at that time.
So when I was a kid, I grew up around Elizabeth Scott, since my very earliest memories. I actually remember Hillcrest, but I remember being in a parade and going through Waterville and stuff. They wouldn't let me drive the truck, but they let me on the float.
In 1969, she was 88. She actually died in my aunt's house, caring for her patients as she did when she passed away. So in '76, I believe they purchased the farm nursing home from my aunt. Later that year, the next year, they completely renovated it.
I did not want the main part of the house to be demolished. So we had a wing on the left side and a wing on the other side. But we still kept the main part of the house, except we had to take the top off. I changed the name because the farm was one thing. I wanted it to be a memory to her.
It became what's now known as Elizabeth Scott Memorial Care Center, and it was in memory to my grandmother. In 1987,
I remember reading about a place, I think it was in Milwaukee.
I think it was Minneapolis.
I read about a nursing home that was there.
There was a facility up there that was brand new, and the new buzzword at that time was assisted living.
And so I sent them up there.
My dad and myself.
And said, take a look up there and see what it looks like and see if that would be something that we could do. It sounds really good to me.
We went up there, spent the day, talked to the owners, the contractors, and we kind of modeled our facility after this facility in Minneapolis.
And so we put the Hillcrest up for sale.
And that was called Phase 1. Basically expanded Elizabeth Scott to the first assisted living building that we have, the 2-story building. And that, I believe, opened in 1988.
2 years later, we built our second phase of assisted living apartments. The Elizabeth Scott Community Nursing Care Center was still there.
And they filled that up right away. Because at that time, there was nowhere else to go. There was really no assisted living around at that time.
At that point, it doubled our size. After the assisted living the second phase was completed, my parents decided to retire.
We worked a lot of time, and we were getting tired.
At that point, two sisters and myself purchased the nursing home from the whole grounds from my parents. And then in '96, we all decided it was time for a new nursing home, 50 beds, brand new facility.
Looking back through history, my grandparents certainly, added a huge number of buildings there, a good amount of them. We've not just stayed nursing home. We've added assisted living. We've added independent living.
At the Elizabeth Scott community, our brand new independent living apartments take the worry out of cooking, cleaning, and home maintenance. We offer spacious one-bedroom, 770 square foot apartments.
And then in 2015, we opened the brand new rehab center.
When we set out to enhance our therapy services, we began by designing a first-class facility, a rehabilitation center that is state-of-the-art, with therapy centered on each person who comes through our door.
Met my wife there in 2006.
Jeannie Booker began working for 3 years while attending college as a resident assistant in Assisted Living Level 1. It was at Elizabeth Scott where she and Matt met and fell in love. Jeannie and Matt were married in 2008.
I never imagined I'd work in a nursing home or be a part of a family who runs one. Being family owned, I think that when you are trying to incorporate a family atmosphere, you truly have to treat people as if they are your family. Because if you don't have that compassion behind you, then you're not going to put that heart and compassion into your work.
I really had one other job pretty much my whole life.
It seems that he knows every resident there. He just runs around and is like full of energy.
He will come up and shake the residents' hands. He will express care to them. He is just like their son.
Even if he would just come by and squeeze my mom's arm, it just meant the world to her that someone that owned the place cared that much about all the residents.
When people come in the door, or when you have a meeting with a family or a resident and they tell you there's a big difference in, our facility versus a corporate facility, and they always are talking about the family aspect.
Most of the continuing care facilities out there are all corporate owned, but we're pretty much the only one around that's family owned and has the whole continuum of care.
This is truly a family business since 1949. It has not been owned by anybody other than the Elizabeth Scott's immediate family for that long. And it's important because today there are so many places that are just run by large real estate companies and nobody knows who the owner is.
I truly think back to Elizabeth Scott and the pressure she was dealing with starting out in her own home and the clientele she must have been dealing with.
You really start to feel very proud and very, very thankful to the generations that have come before us. Elizabeth Scott, her own self, and my grandparents, and what my dad's done.
If I had to do it over again, I would not choose anything but this.
I think if I had it to do over, I would do exactly what I did.
I recently was told we may be one of 5 facilities in the state of Ohio that have been family owned and operated this long.
We have a lot of family members that are repeat customers, and they spread the word by just telling the story of Elizabeth Scott and how wonderful our staff members are in caring for their loved ones. What can be better? Nothing.